They were not born, they were forged. Beneath the blood-red sky of ancient Sparta, cries of newborns echoed against the cliffs. Some were silenced before their first breath reached the gods. Others were carried to the agoge, the iron cradle where boys were beaten into warriors and girls were sculpted into the mothers of deathless men. Sparta did not believe in love, it believed in perfection, and perfection demanded pain. In the heart of ancient Greece, beyond the tranquil olive groves of Athens and the shining temples of Delphi, there stood a city carved from stone and silent Sparta. It was a place without laughter, without softness. A city where every birth was a question and every child a test. When a Spartan baby came into the world, it was not the mother who decided if it would live, it was the state. The elders gathered around the infant, their faces hard as mountain rock. If the child's limbs were strong, its chest broad, and its cries fierce, it was deemed worthy. But if it trembled, if it cried too softly, or bore any mark of frailty, it was taken to the foot of Mount Taygetus. There, beneath the cold shadow of the peaks, the weak were left to die. They called it the exposure, but in truth, it was a culling. The Spartan elders did not weep. To them, mercy was weakness. A city surrounded by enemies could not afford the luxury of compassion. Better 1,000 graves than a single coward, one of them would murmur, tossing a frail infant into the abyss. Those who lived through that brutal judgment would later carry the weight of it, the knowledge that their survival had been bought by another's death. From their earliest breath, Spartan children belonged not to their parents but to Sparta herself. The state became their mother, their father, their god. When boys reached the age of 7, they were torn from their homes and sent to the agoge, the cruel academy of war. They arrived barefoot, wearing only thin tunics, shivering in the mountain air. The older boys greeted them not with kindness but with blows. The first lesson was simple. There was no room for softness in a warrior's heart. Their training began before dawn. They were taught to endure hunger, pain, and humiliation without a sound. If food was scarce, they were encouraged to steal. But if they were caught, they were not punished for theft, only for being caught. A true Spartan must be cunning as well as strong. The boys slept on beds made of reeds, their skin raw from the cold, their bellies empty, their spirits sharpened like blades. Every strike from a teacher's whip, every kick from a fellow trainee carved away weakness. Pain is a friend, they were told. It teaches obedience. Their instructors would stand over them, eyes gleaming like iron. A Spartan does not feel hunger. A Spartan does not feel fear. A Spartan only obeys. By 12, the boys were already warriors in form, though not yet in name. They hunted wild beasts in the forests, fought one another with fists and sticks until blood soaked the ground. Those who could not endure were discarded, expelled from the agoge and branded as cowards, an eternal shame worse than death. But the cruelty was not only for the boys. Spartan girls, too, were molded by the same unforgiving hand. They trained their bodies like athletes, running, wrestling, throwing javelins beneath the blazing sun. They were told that strong mothers birth strong sons, and that to bear warriors was their sacred duty. In Sparta, a woman's worth was not her beauty, but her strength. Only the hard give birth to the hard, the elders said. Marriage itself was a ritual of brutality. When a Spartan man took a wife, he would seize her from her home in the night. Her head would be shaved, her body dressed in men's clothes, and only then would he claim her. Their union was not of affection but of purpose, to produce the perfect soldier. Even their love was forged through discipline and denial. In the darkness of Sparta, tenderness was weakness, and weakness was treason. And yet, amid all this savagery, there was an eerie harmony. The boys, though beaten, grew into brothers. They shared food, blood, and pain. The city that had stripped them of comfort had also stripped them of fear. When they stood shoulder to shoulder in battle, they did not fight for themselves but for the brother on their right. This was Sparta's secret, a civilization that had traded humanity for unity, weakness for unbreakable strength. The agoge did not merely train warriors, it rewired their souls. By the time a Spartan youth reached 20, he was no longer a man of flesh but a weapon. His loyalty was not to family, not to the gods, but to Sparta itself, the mother who had stolen his childhood and replaced it with discipline. He was the embodiment of a cruel ideal, the perfect soldier. At 20, a Spartan warrior entered the Syssitia, the brotherhood of soldiers who ate, trained, and lived together. There was no separation between life and war. Every meal was preparation, every breath was discipline. The black broth, a vile mixture of pig's blood, vinegar, and salt, was their sustenance. Foreign visitors gagged at the sight of it, but to the Spartans it was sacred. "This is what hardens the heart," they said. They slept in barracks, not homes. Even married men could visit their wives only in secrecy, slipping into their homes under the cover of night like thieves. Love was not forbidden, but it was never allowed to interfere with duty. A man who lingered too long with his wife risked ridicule, for affection was seen as weakness, and weakness was death. The Irenes, senior warriors, continued to train the young. Punishments were severe, often fatal, but the men welcomed it. To die in training was honorable, to show pain was disgrace. The city's entire structure revolved around war, from the blacksmith who forged the spear to the mother who whispered war songs to her unborn child. Every Spartan heart beat in rhythm with the clash of shields. Sparta's women, though barred from combat, wielded immense power in other ways. They managed estates, issued commands, and raised sons with the same iron conviction as their fathers. When a mother sent her boy to war, she handed him his shield and said, "Return with it or on it." Those words were not metaphorical, they were a commandment. A son who returned alive without his shield was a coward. Better he had died than brought shame to his bloodline. The Helots, slaves from conquered lands, were forced to farm and labor to sustain Sparta's warriors. Every year the government declared a secret war against them, allowing citizens to hunt and kill Helots at will. This ritual, the Crypteia, was both training and terror. Young Spartans, barely out of boyhood, stalked through the night to murder Helots who seemed too strong or defiant. It was a test of stealth, cruelty, and loyalty. Those who hesitated were never seen again. Sparta's strength grew monstrous. When the Persian armies came, vast and countless, it was the Spartans who stood at the pass of Thermopylae. 300 men against hundreds of thousands. They fought without fear, because fear had been beaten out of them before they could walk. When Leonidas, their king, fell beneath a rain of arrows, the men did not break formation. They died as they had lived, silent, disciplined, perfect. But perfection comes with a price. The world around Sparta changed. Cities began to value art, philosophy, and trade. Athens built statues and ideas, Sparta built graves. The same system that had made it strong also made it inflexible. When the wars ended and peace came, Sparta had nothing left to live for. Without battle, the warriors became restless, purposeless. The agoge could create killers, but not thinkers, not dreamers. The brutal breeding that had once sustained the city became its curse. With so few born and so many dying in battle, the population began to crumble. Women outnumbered men. The iron discipline that once bound Sparta together became chains that suffocated it. By the time Rome rose to power, the Spartan ideal had faded into myth. And yet, even in ruin, their legend endured. The world still whispers their name with awe: Sparta, the city that conquered fear itself. But behind the glory lies a truth few dare to speak. The perfect warrior is not born, he is broken. Sparta's perfection was not divine. It was human, carved from pain, sacrifice, and loss. They believed they were breeding gods, but in the end they were forging ghosts.